Welcome to the 9th episode of the Mechs on Deck show. I'm Osiris. This is Chewy. He's got his heck tester, aka his switch tester, or one of his many.
Heck.
One of his many.
I only have two.
Well, don't you have a couple big guys?
I have one huge one.
Yeah.
And then I have my fidget cube thing that I just sit here with my four favorite tactiles. But yeah, welcome. We are going to be going over tips for the build. So we're just going to kind of run through, what you need from start to finish, of things that you need to acquire for your build and things that you would want to require for future builds. So things that, that are helpful to have always. So Eric, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So as far as, kind of the first thing you want to do, get a list together. This is kind of our list that we put together for you. PCB. Figure out what type of size of keyboard you want, whether that's 65, 60, 75, TKL, or even a full-size board. Figure out what size layout you want. Buy your PCB. Make sure you get one that is pre-soldered. If it's not soldered, they're kind of hard to find at this point, unsoldered PCBs, but you can find them. Soldering diodes and all that stuff it's not super hard, but it's meticulous because they are very small. Especially if you're not well versed in soldering, it can.
Or you have big fat fingers like me.
Yeah, it can be not a good time. You end up the solder. The points on the board are so close to the solder, ends up touching each other. It's kind of what happens sometimes when you solder LEDs. It ends up not being a fun time. So get it pre-soldered with everything on it. And then next, you want to get a plate. And you want to make sure said plate fits layout for PCB.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to make sure your desired layout is supported. I've run into this issue. The first 60% build I ever made, I got halfway through it and realized that I cannot use this plate anymore because I got the wrong left shift. So just do your research, ask us on Discord, ask, the buyer, or not buyer, but seller. And make, if you want to get, it's kind of hard at this point to test plate, different plates, different materials, but I would recommend brass and then maybe stainless steel after that. I am personally not a fan of polycarb or any of those. They do sound great, but I'm not about the squishiness. But grab yourself a plate. 60% is where you're going to run into this issue a lot with just kind of the different layouts, but just make sure that it fits and make sure that, for your desired layout, it can save you a big, it can save you a lot of time and a lot of stress. And then kind of the third thing, you need simple case.
Yeah.
So, and you want that case to fit. So just because you buy a PCB and a plate that fits, it might not necessarily fit inside of the case that you want.
Yeah, especially with certain plates don't fit mounting styles of other cases. They're not all drop in and ready to go. Sometimes they don't necessarily work together. So make sure you've got your plate, your PCB, and your case all come together and create one uniform board. And then, of course, go ahead.
And sorry, real quick, just for the most part, a lot of times I will say, if you're getting in like a group buy, outside of 60% that I've seen, most group buys are going to just have all three of these. So you're not going to really have to worry about it. Just make sure that before you get in the group buy, you want to ensure that the layout that you want is supported by this. But, we have started to see the trend of 60% not including PCBs to kind of reduce on price, and the 60% is becoming more and more standard. But if you are deciding to buy piece by piece, the top mounted boards, especially for like from KBD fans, for the standard layout top mounted boards, just make sure just do your research. It saves you a lot of stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you've listened to Chewy talk for more than 5 minutes, you know that you should have a switch tester. So at this point, you should know exactly what switches you want. If not, buy a switch tester before you buy the switches, because you don't want to get into a situation when you got everything together and you hate the switches.
Let's to summer 2018 speed bronzes. Not a fan of those switches.
Unlucky.
But
yeah, with that, you want something nice to top that board off. You want to have some fancy looking keycaps. You want to have some that you like the way they look and they fit well with the board and the layout you're looking for. Big thing there, the layout. The bottom row can screw you over.
Absolutely.
60% boards, if you're running HHKB or Win keyless, you need a 7U spacebar. Those are kind of hard to find in certain brands and certain levels of keycaps. If you're getting something from, say, KBD fans and you're getting some of their lower end stuff, they're more cost-effective keycap sets. It might not have that 7U spacebar. It might not have that short shift that you're looking for on the right side. So just be careful. Make sure you've got all the caps for the compatibility that you need to fit your plate and your PCB and your preferred layout.
Absolutely. And outside of that, the two things that people will forget the most, because you do get sent them sometimes, but sometimes you don't. Stabilizers. You can get them. I would highly recommend, we're not sponsored by anybody here, but I would highly recommend getting them from Novel Keys. If you can, go ahead and grab a couple extra. They're $2 for the 2U space bars, and you'll definitely need somewhere between 2 to 4 for a 60%, and just do your due diligence on research on that. And then the space bar, and make sure you're getting the correct space bar length. So if you're going with a standard ANSI with a 6.25, don't grab a 7U stabilizer. It will not work. So you can definitely get those. They're very cheap. Highly recommend getting a handful of them. Grab some extras, if you're going to be clipping and lubing, which we'll talk about that in a minute. You're going to want to, things happen. I've broken stabilizers before. It happens. So, and then last but not least, you're an iPhone user and you're very excited about, you're moving from your Corsair that has just a built-in cable to this awesome Tofu, but you're an iPhone user and you don't have a USB-C. And then at the very end of your build, you have to go to the store or the gas station. Don't do that.
Yeah, you don't want to have to make that Best Buy run at 7-8 p.m. or say you start the build late at night. You don't want to not be able to plug that boy in.
The walk of shame.
The walk of shame.
That's what that is. Or the weight of shame.
Yeah. And then you got to ask people where the USB-C or, God forbid, the USB micro B. Good luck with that one. That one's a hard one to find at this point.
Prime Now might not have it.
That's true.
So, just be weary. And a lot of company, they'll send you a cable with the PCBs, but honestly, you can buy them very cheap. If you have a Type-C and a micro USB, you're pretty much good on buying cables from there on, of having to avoid buying cables. Something I would just have. So,
yeah.
So moving on. These are just going to be things that you definitely need for the build, but you're going to use these across multiple builds. So first and foremost, you need a soldering iron. But wait, Chewy, I have a hot swap board, and I did this specifically because of this. But guess what? You can chewy it up, and with your awesome muscly fingers, just plow right through that hot swap board and snap or pop off a hot swap socket, and you will need to resolder it. It takes 2 seconds, but we're not saying that you need to get one of these fancy soldering irons. You can get a decent one for you can get one that works for probably 20-30 bucks. And I highly, I mean, if you're getting one for soldering, absolutely you need one, but I would just definitely recommend getting some solder.
Yeah.
Or sorry, soldering iron.
Well, you need the solder too.
Yeah, you do.
It's good to have. It's good to have at least a little bit. You can buy small amounts. You don't have to buy a giant roll off Amazon. If you are looking to get, a preferred soldering iron, solder that we use, it's we both, I believe it's Kirster.
I always call it Kester.
Kester.
I
don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know how to talk.
It's over there. That's all the way over there.
Yeah. And then, it's good to have something to pick solder up if you do make a mistake or you need to remove a switch. So like a solder sucker, you can get a plastic one or even a metal one for, 5, 10, 15 bucks on Amazon, or maybe some desoldering wick, which is even less expensive, but, is not quite as easy. It takes a little bit more time and, it's not as easy as just heating it up and just going bloop. I prefer desoldering wick. I just think it overall performs nicer for me. But solder sucker is definitely a little bit of a one-stop shop there.
I prefer paying people to desolder my boards. I've done enough desoldering in my life to hate desoldering. But desoldering is not the most fun, but you definitely need a pump. You definitely need something to be able to just get it out. So moving on, you've got your solder sucker, you've got your solder, you've got your soldering iron. You need some tweezers. Most any tweezers will do. You're going to want to, you definitely want them because you need to do a few things with them. You need metal tipped tweezers specifically so that you can test your PCB. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but you do need those to test your PCB. And it is also, to me, the most effective way of straightening out pins that do get bent. There are so many times where I have bent pins, and that's just a very easy thing to be able to fix.
Yeah, so the next, and it's not a bad thing to have some, like ceramic tweezers or something that has a little bit different tip, so that way it, you can kind of take some heat there and you don't have it go through the tweezers and end up burning yourself. So it's nice to have something like that laying around as well. Not 100% necessary, but definitely want to get some metal tweezers there so you can get in there and grab some screws out and definitely test that PCB as well as do any kind of little poking and prodding that you have to do. And the next, you definitely want a screwdriver set.
Absolutely.
You definitely want something that's got multiple different size bits in there. And who knows, look and see if there's some other tech items that you're interested in working on. See if it supports that as well. I know sometimes they'll come with the different proprietary bits for like MacBook computers or different things like that. It's nice to have. You never know how much you'll use it once you buy one. If you can, get one that's magnetic, so that way it kind of holds onto the screws a little bit better. You definitely want to make sure it's got different size Phillips heads because screws in a plate, that screw in a plate might be really tiny on the Phillips head, and screws to screw the actual top and the bottom of the case together might be a little bit bigger. You don't want to get in a situation where your screwdriver is too big for that or too small, because if it's too small, you could end up stripping out that screw. And same thing if it's too big. Either way, you can strip it out. You don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. So, switch puller. Definitely need a switch puller. So some of them will come with switch pullers. So if you get kind of a set, especially hot swap sets, I know a lot of them come with a switch puller. You can find them on Amazon though. It's called an IC puller. It's like $5. The one that I use is fantastic. It if you're putting these, if you've ever put a switch on a plate before, you know how much of a nightmare it is to get it out. And especially if you don't have one of it, it's already can be difficult removing it with the IC puller or a switch puller, but getting that out, especially if you've soldered in all these switches, then you realize you need to remove a switch. You don't get the benefit of being able to turn the plate over and just pop it out with your thumbs. So you need something to be able to remove that in case you make an issue or in case the switch doesn't work. So
Yeah, definitely great to have. Next thing, get into something that's kind of less needed, but still super useful. If you're planning on modding those switches, get yourself a switch opener. You could use your tweezers to kind of get that open. It's going to be very tedious. It's going to take a while. But if you get yourself a switch opener, 10, 15 bucks, it's going to make your world a lot better.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of these high-end switch openers now. I've got one that's like a 3D printed one I just bought off of some website. I don't remember. But, Osiris and I, we have some of these fancier metal switch openers coming in soon. So you can find them, pretty much everywhere. I'd recommend getting one that can do Cherry MX style switches and Kale style switches, because Kale style switches, if you want to make these holy pandas that everyone loves, you're going to need to be able to open some Kale switches, which you can do with tweezers. You can do all the stuff with tweezers, but it does make your life significantly easier if you are modding switches with that.
Definitely lowers the time to get the switch open, especially with like a Kale switch. There's a little bit of a kind of a balance you have to do if you're just using tweezers. It's not
it's not fun.
It's not fun. If you can't tell, I've
stabbed myself so many times on kill switches.
Yep.
So, but last but not least, we would recommend just getting a desk mat or a play mat. You can get those Ultra Pro ones for card games. You can get one of those desk mat or play mats thing that that's usually a good enough size to kind of put whatever over a table. You don't want to destroy your table. Solder is going to get everywhere, especially if you're desoldering. So it's just good. You can pick up a nicer mat from Novel Keys. Just know that once again, not sponsored. Sorry, that totally sounded like straight sponsor. But you can get one of these Novel Key mats, or a lot of places are starting to sell these kind of larger desk mats. But something that just kind of protect, because you also want to protect your board from other things, and you want to make sure that it's neat and easily cleanable. So I would recommend getting something like that.
Yeah, it's always good to have, and it's especially good to have something that's like cloth like that, so that way, say you drop a screw or something, if you drop it on a hard surface, that mug's going to be bouncing around. You're going to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
If you drop it on a cloth, it might not bounce as much. It might just sit there, So
nice and easy.
So,
and that's what we are trying to make this. Your first build is nice and easy. We want it to be nice and easy. We talk a lot about on Mechs on Deck. We talk a lot about experience. That's a big reason that we are in this hobby, is the experience of building a keyboard and how awesome it is. And that's what we want to ensure that you have that awesome experience. So,
yeah. So you've got your switches, you've got your whole list filled out, you got all your tools. What do you do next, Chewy?
You got to get a box cutter, open those boxes. No, okay. Sorry. So you're going to start your build. You don't have to light candles, but if you do, take a pic, send it to me, and I will give you a shout out, because yes. But anyway, so when you start your build, first things first, test your PCB. You're going to take those tweezers, those metal tip tweezers, and you're going to poke. You're going to take them, you're going to poke each of the little holes and make sure you're touching both of them. And you're going to go on something. What I use is EK Switch Hitter. I'll put a link down below. It's very simple software, lets you test your switches, making sure that they're registering, making sure there's no key chatter, just so that they're good. So the PCB, you want to, you want to test just punching my mic. No worries. You want to test your PCB, make sure it's all working, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend programming your PCB before you do anything. So know what layout you're going to use, program it, and even more importantly, program a reset button, because we have seen, we used to see a lot on these KVD fans where there'd be a little opening for a reset button that you could press without having to take it out of the case. But especially on like a top mount board, nothing is more infuriating than having to take that out every single time you want to flash your PCB. So there are great guides on how to flash your PCB and using QMK. But personally, just get it all flashed in so that basically when you're done, you don't have to really program it. The second you're done, you put the keycaps on and you're typing away. So
Yeah.
start with the PCB.
Write it down too. Write down that function layer, because what the reset button is. You don't want to put that on your main layer. Put it on a different function layer, because if you put it on your main layer, you could be typing around. You're playing a game, you accidentally hit that button, and then all of a sudden your keyboard like cuts out for 5 seconds. So put it on a function layer, write it down, remember it, so that way if worst comes to worst, you can always reset it. But after that, get your stabilizers ready. Once the PCB is ready to go, it works. Get those stabilizers ready, clip them. We'll link to some videos about how to clip and lube your stabilizers. You definitely want to do that. The next, you want to test them. Sometimes if you put too much lube on those stabilizers, they won't return, especially with like lighter spring tactile switches. It'll get stuck. It does take a little bit of force to push up those stabilizers, especially the space bar. When they're over lubed, you might have to get in there, take it apart, and rub a little bit off, and then put it back together. Give them a nice little try.
So and make sure you got to test these before soldering anything. You will be able, you can rest the switch in there and test, and you'll be able to tell if it's working. And even if you think it might be a little bit over lubed, it's probably over lubed. And just go through and kind of clean it up, because once again, you need to test these stabilizers so that you don't get all the way to the end and solder everything in, and you realize your stabilizers are messed up, and then you have to start all the way over, and you have to desolder it, and you don't want to do that. So.
Not fun, because you can't get those stabilizers out once you're done soldering. Well, you can get them out, but you can't get them back in.
You can get them out. I've done it. You can't get them out in one piece, but you cannot get them back in. You can absolutely not get them back in.
Well, if you're using a plate. If you're not using a plate and you're just doing PCB, then you'd be okay, but
we still recommend you do that.
Definitely.
So
definitely
easier on hot swap too, but let's get some anchor switches in there.
Let's do it. Where are we putting them?
You got to get some anchor switch. You got to put them. There's not really a right or wrong way, but I like to do corners, anything with a stabilizer, the number 7, lucky number 7, and just kind of down the middle. And so what you're doing is you're putting in these switches to make sure your plate and your PCB are in the right place and that's holding together, and just solder those in. And even if you're using a hot swap, put those in, because you need stability to be able to put the rest of the switches in. So make sure on a soldering board or on a non-hot swap board, once you get those soldered in, I'll kick back and watch a TV show or watch some Top Clack, and
not sponsored,
and not sponsored, but watch something. You can kind of, you don't have to do it with, you can just do it in your hand and just kind of sit there and pop them in and make sure the pins are going through. If you are doing a hot swap, this is very important. Make sure that you do not do that. You put the plate and the PCB needs to be on something, needs to be on a surface, because what will happen is if you try and pop them in, you can accidentally force, if the pin gets bent, you can force and break one of those hot swap sockets and pull them off of the solder. Which, I mean, it's a quick fix, but why have to run into any issues? So especially since you've already tested your PCB, you know it works, and then you get it back and it doesn't work, and you realize it was your own fault.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Then you know, if you do that, you might spend 15, 20, 30 minutes trying to figure out what's wrong, and then you open it up and there's a hot swap just barely hanging off.
Little dangleberry.
But yeah, so make sure you push them through. The next thing is, once you get those anchor switches in, put in the remainder of your switches, making sure that they're pushed in fully, and then you can get to soldering. And when you're soldering, make sure you're taking your time. You're not trying to rush. Make sure that when you are applying the solder to the pins, you want it to be shiny. If it's not shiny, and if it starts looking kind of hazy, and you'll know, you can see it. That means it's a cold solder. It's not a hot solder. And I don't mean like in the terms of cold, like it's physically cold versus hot, physically hot. I'm talking about in terms of conductiveness. You also want it to look like a dome or like a teepee, and not like a dome. If it looks like a dome, you're using too much. If it looks like a teepee or a tent, that's about right.
No Epcots, all right?
No Epcots.
No Epcots.
No golf balls.
And just to ensure that we don't get sued, do not touch the solder, at least for like a minute. Don't check these cold solder spots
Yeah.
to see if they're actually cold.
It's a term to mean that it's not conductive.
I just don't want,
It doesn't happen as much when you're doing boards, keyboards, but if you were soldering other things, then
yeah, absolutely. That's plus you don't want to waste solder. There's no, you don't need a lot. And if you are kind of buying to, I'm buying this one board and this is probably going to be it, and I'm only going to buy enough solder, you don't want to overdo it and then run out of solder. So
yeah, you don't want to get like halfway through and you're like, well, crap, I got to go back to the store, or I got to wait for 2 days on Amazon. So it's always better to have more solder than you need. It's always better to take your time, make sure that everything is going well, make sure that you're not missing switches. I've done that every single time I do a board. I miss at least one pin.
Yep. I miss entire rows. So, and there's no real way to do an order. Just take your time, enjoy it. It's cool. It's a cool thing. Like it sounds weird, but it's a cool thing to just kind of sit there and work on a board, turn on some music, turn on some Mechs on deck in the background. Whatever your poison is, just enjoy it. We want you to enjoy the experience. I love building boards, and I love just kind of, grabbing a couple hours and building a board. So just take your time, because if you rush it, you're probably going to make a mistake. Because I've rushed boards and I've made plenty of mistakes. So
we're rocking the plugs today. Plugging that top clack, plugging ourselves
all day long.
But yeah. And then once you're done soldering, make sure you test all the switches. Sometimes, it's not super often, it does happen, one of the switches might be dead. You really don't have any way of knowing until, you try it all out. I know Chewy does this. He goes through switch hitter. He hits all the switches, resets it, and then goes through them at least one more time, if not
twice
more than
as
that.
Nice.
So then that way for absolute certainty that there's nothing wrong. I had it one time. I had a switch for like 2 months where only one pin was soldered. And one day I was just like freaking out because I couldn't figure why my V key wasn't registering. And then I opened it up and I'm like, oh, it's because it's not soldering, and it's not soldered in, and it probably was just sitting against the metal ring for the past couple months, and then it finally moved, and now it doesn't work. So test it all out. Make sure it works. Validate.
And that's why we didn't mention this earlier, but buy some extra switches. Never buy the exact amount. Buy, just a couple handful. You don't need a lot more. You don't need twice as many. But if you're buying the 60%, you're going to need 60 to 64 switches. Buy 70. A lot of times you can only get switches in 10 packs. So buy 70 switches so you can have a couple extra, because the last thing you want to do, with these boards is not just have a dead switch. And then you're going to have to buy extras anyway after that. So just make sure you're buying some extra switches. Dead switches happen. There are some times where they just do not work. They're just, they made 20,000 switches. Yeah, right. They're going to make 20,000 100% working all the time, and they didn't get damaged in both shipping. So,
and if you have extra switches, you can do what Chewy does and give them to your friends, and then get them further into a hobby and steal all their money.
Yep. Steal all their money that you don't actually get to see.
Yeah.
So, next thing you want to do, so you check your solder joints, check the entire row, make sure you try and look for those lonesome switches you completely forgot, and then test it in this. We recommended EK switch hitter. Test it, and then once no chatter. But once you've got that done, you are 100%. You've got your reset switch and reset button already programmed on a second or third or fourth layer, and your PCB works and everything's 100% done. Clean your area.
Yeah, it's the final countdown. You don't want to get all excited. You put your keyboard down on the surface that you built on, and then all of a sudden you've got solder scratching up the weight on the bottom of your keyboard and making that shiny brass PVD all of a sudden just looking like poo because it's got scratches all over it. You want that to look fresh, to look clean. You want to be able to take a picture, post it on Reddit, post it on Instagram, get the likes, get that karma.
Updates for days on clean builds.
Yeah.
So just, make sure, like you said, solder gets everywhere. Screw, you might have a screw you didn't realize.
Yeah.
That's just laying there with extra. ready to ruin your entire board. So clean it all up, because at this point you're going to be working with your screwdriver set that you bought and your keycaps. So clean it all up, throw that bad boy in the case, screw it all in. And one thing worth noting, with a lot of these boards, with the top and bottom piece. So this is the TX60, for instance. You're going to see how, and I've gotten this on my Tofu, where there is a seam, and you want to make sure that the seam is flush. So what I highly recommend is you screw them in for the most part, about 3/4 of the way, and then try and align it up to make sure it's nice and flush, because it drives me crazy personally. I see this on the Tofu a lot because of those sharp corners. Make sure it's aligned up, and then kind of slowly screw them in by each corner. And you don't want to run into a situation where, once you got it all done, you got these little awkward ridges, and that's some people might not care, but it just, if you're spending decent money on a board, you want it to be perfect.
Yeah.
So
it's not fun when it doesn't line up. You could damage the screws that screw the board in, and then all of a sudden you can't get it out. Plus, like Chewy said, you want to make it look nice. You want it to be as freaking awesome as possible.
So, and then some of the best advice I've been given about building boards came from Osiris over a year ago, about top-mounted boards and screws.
You got to make sure you have those either on a magnetic screwdriver, or what I've done many a time is I go ahead and use my tweezers.
Drop them in.
I drop them in with the tweezer, kind of give it just a little turn. So then that way it's kind of already set in there, and then start screwing. Because the second you drop one of those screws and it falls between the PCB and the plate, that is going to be the bane of your existence for the next 25 minutes.
Absolutely.
Or you're going to have to, especially if it's the very last screw, and that's when it always happens, that very last screw. You're trying to screw the middle of the board in, and you let go, and it just You hear it fall all the way down. And then you're thinking in your head, can I save this? No, you can't.
Not even close.
You gotta unscrew the whole thing and shake that baby out. So it's better to either drop them in with some tweezers, get a magnetic screwdriver, charge the magnet on there. That is a thing you have to do sometimes. You have to charge it up. So that way it's safe. Because top mount boards can suck when you lose the screw in the board.
Absolutely. Hour 20, hour and 20 minutes on my KBD 75. Long time ago. Don't have that board anymore. But man, hour and 20 minutes trying to get one screw out. So, finishing touches before you put your keycaps on, real quick. Eric said you got to get those updates, that karma, that Instagram. You want to be Instagram famous. Get some compressed air. If you're fancy, get one of those, air gun things. Just get something, blow out the board. Beard hair gets everywhere. Dust, extra solder dust, all that stuff. Blow it all out so you can get to the final, most rewarding thing, which is putting the keycaps on. So take your time. You don't need to cram them in there. You're not playing one of those smash it games to see how high your score can go. Just take your time, put them on there. Make sure you're putting them on the right keys. So I've messed up. N and M always get me.
Yeah, if you noticed in the in my TX60 video, I actually messed up. I think it was either X and C or C and V. When I first put the caps on, I had it wrong in the JTK tray that they come in. Put it on the board wrong. Happens every time. Sometimes you mix up the keys.
Sometimes.
So,
but you finished your build. You've taken pictures. It's beautiful. It works. You have a reset switch sitting on there. You've got a little baggie with some extra stabilizers, some extra switches, your other keycaps, all that stuff. You've got it all done. Congratulations. Are in order. If you're watching this, join our Discord, throw a picture up.
Yeah.
Because we want to see. Because a certain somebody did that recently.
Yes, they did.
So we're going to move on to keyboard of the week. Eric, I will let you introduce the keyboard of the week.
So winning keyboard of the week this episode is our boy, Magic Gnome. You may know him as Tim the Enchanter on Reddit. This is his Tofu standard top with I almost said GMK, but it's not. It's EPPT 9009 and a fancy cable from Zap Cables, I believe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great looking board. Tofu case always looks great. It's that simple, clean aesthetic that looks fantastic. And Joy PBT is such a good set, such a good looking set, especially those red accent mods. Kind of just brings the whole thing together. The matching cable looks nice. So this is his first kind of full custom, full deep dive into the into the mechanical keyboard. Where he decided to just grab his wallet and throw it as far as he possibly can. But yeah, it looks fantastic. He's got Zelio V1s in there lubed. I'm sure it types great. I'm sure it feels great. I'm sure it sounds great. I know he was super stoked on it. So yeah. And we decided, we wanted to, for this is kind of the beginner. We are working towards a complete playlist of getting into it, the beginner guide. And this is, now that you've built your board, we wanted to kind of give a shout out to someone who just built their board and who, the kind of the new person. So we wanted to make sure we gave that shout out. So congratulations, Magic Gnome, Tim the Enchanter.
Yeah. Congratulations, my dude. If you want your board to be in our background, you want it to win Keyboard of the Week, join our Discord. We've got Keyboard of the Week submission channel where you can put in your sexy pictures. You can show us all the boards you want. We'll go through them. We'll pick every week. We'll add them to our scrolling background. We want it to get longer. We want to get to a point where we have a 40, 50-minute video and you don't see the same board twice.
Never see the same board. You might see the same key set. Cough, cough, camping. If you want Keyboard of the Week, you know what set to put on there.
Yeah. I have to fight with him every week about a camping board versus literally anything else.
Everything. I think this is the only week where I was like, all right, I'll give.
Yeah. Plus, he just got in this the Olivia desk mat. It's looking mighty fine. It's quite the very nice.
We should almost call this Keyboard of the Week, the mighty fine keyboard, because it's squeaky clean. And you guys don't know this because there's a car wash called Mighty Fine Car Wash where we live.
There is.
So
I've been there.
Mighty Fine Keyboard of the Week, squeaky clean. Congratulations. I wish I could type on it. I really wish I do.
Me too. Dave wants that purse.
You know, the purse key is arguably one of the best keys that has ever existed. Fight me.
Well, I think on that note, I think that's going to do it for us. We definitely appreciate you stopping by if you got to this point. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We release videos every Tuesday, and then we stream now on twitch.tv/mechsondeck on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Central. I believe that is 6 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. So that's a lot of times. So I'm going to say it again, 8 p.m. Central.
9 p.m. Eastern.
I am an idiot. I have an account on Overwatch called I'm an Idiot, and that just verified why I have that account name.
But yeah, come hang out with us. It's that's more of a kind of a free talk. It replaced Free Talk Friday. But yeah, thank you for all the current subs. We will be having some giveaways soon to our subscribers. So stay tuned for more information on that. We're very excited about some of those giveaways. And yeah, thank you for the continued support. Come hang out with us on Discord. We love talking about keyboards. Enjoy.
Have a great day.
Buy a Switch tester.
Not sponsored.